Great to see you guys. Many of you I would know. Good to see your friendly faces. Some of you, many of you as well. I don't know, probably about 50-50. My name's Johnny. One of the team that runs Sputnik. And it's a wonderful pleasure to have Chibundu with us this evening. Chibundu is an award-winning novelist, a screenplay writer, a Guardian columnist. Something I found out today as well, Chibundu, a singer of some note as well. I've seen the videos, beautiful. An advocate for religious freedom and social justice, both in her birth country of Nigeria and in Britain. And it is such a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Can we give a big, however you want to do this, I don't know on Zoom, but can we give a big round of applause and welcome? Yes, emojis galore if you like that sort of thing. Oh no, very British. It's a round of applause. Oh no, there's a couple of yellow hands with some red things coming out of them. Now, I know some of the audience today would be card-carrying Chibundu groupies already. I don't know if that's the correct phrase. Others might be here with a passing knowledge of her work and just looking to glean some help for your own writing. And so I thought to start, it would be great to bring us all up to speed. So Chibundu, good to see you. I don't know on your screen whether we'll keep popping up here and there, but I just thought I'd ask, can you just give us a bit of an introduction to your, I guess let's call it your writing journey, just to kick us off. Is that okay?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, hello, everybody. Thanks for coming. This is nice, actually. I was saying to Johnny that I rarely get to talk specifically about my faith and my writing. So often it's like a question that will come up in one of like, I don't know, maybe 15 questions in a discussion, but it's nice to have a whole event sort of on this theme. So I was born in Nigeria, moved to England when I was a teenager, and I've been here ever since. I started writing when I was quite young, when I was 10. That was the first attempt I remember at writing a novel. I was a very big reader. So I started this novel at 10, and I lived in Nigeria at the time, but I didn't have any Nigerian people in my novel. So sort of all my novel characters were white Americans because all the TV I watched was populated by white Americans. And it wasn't until I moved to England that I actually started setting my fiction in Nigeria. I think out of some of a sense of nostalgia, but also a sense of sort of pride, belated pride in where I had lived and where I was coming from, etc., etc. So this is something we can talk about also specifically in the Q&A, but specifically how I got published, which may be of interest to quite a few writers here, was this book, The Writers and Artists Yearbook. This is the 2006 edition. My oldest sister, Dilishi, bought it for me. And that's how I found my agent. My agent is one of the agents listed in this book. And so yes, eventually I sent her one of the manuscripts that I was working on at the time. And then I got an agent. And then I got a publisher. And then that's not the end. You know, when you want to get published, you always think that's the end. But it's not the end. It's just the beginning. So yes, 10 years later, roughly, actually more than 10 years later, 11 years after I got, maybe 12 after I got my agent. So I wrote a novel. My first novel was called The Spider King's Daughter. My second is called Welcome to Lagos. And my third is called Sankofa. So I'm actually very excited because my proof copies arrived today. And so this is one of the most exciting things is journey to publication, when you get your first proof. So you're like, oh, it's a physical thing. It's no longer on a screen. So yeah, this is exciting. Yeah. That's my writing journey so far.
Very much so far, amazing. So with the new book, just obviously got the proofs today. I mean, it's funny. I could have done the intro. I was thinking of the intro. How many of your awards could I fit in? I thought, oh, it's going to take me forever. But it's an amazing achievement. I mean, you just you finished your PhD as well a couple of years ago, wasn't it? 2018. Just very, very, very impressive. Well, when I talked to Chibundu the other day in preparation for this, she offered this without me applying the thumb screws or anything. We said, oh, I could read a section from the new novel. I mean, I personally thought, yeah, I think that sounds like a really good idea. Great. So to kick us off, we'd love to hear it. I imagine there's not that many people who've heard extracts from
No, there's like no one. This is like a world exclusive for Sputnik. So yes.
I told you it's a good use of your evening, everybody. Well, I'm going to hand over to Chibundu, and she's going to kick us off with a reading from Sankofa. Great, thank you. Chibundu, over to you.
Okay, so as our event is sort of faith-themed, so I'm going to read the blurb, and then I'm going to explain the extracts that I'm going to read to you. Anna is at a stage of her life when she's beginning to wonder who she really is. She has separated from her husband, her daughter is all grown up, and her mother, the only parent who raised her, is dead. Searching through her mother's belongings one day, Anna finds clues about the African father she never knew. His student diaries chronicle his involvement in radical politics in 1970s London. Anna discovers that he eventually became the president, some would say dictator, of a small nation in West Africa, and he is still alive. When Anna decides to track her father down, a journey begins that is disarmingly moving, funny, and fascinating. These are not my words, but I agree with all these adjectives. It raises universal questions of race and belonging, the overseas experience for the African diaspora, and the search for a family's hidden roots, etc., etc. Okay. So that's the blurb. That's what the book is about. So this is Anna finding her father. But then Anna also has a neighbor, and her neighbor is a Christian, and so her neighbor invites her to church one Sunday. And so that is the extract that I'm going to read for you, because this is like an appropriate theme for tonight's event. Okay. I'm going to church with Catherine. She rang to ask me this morning if I wanted to come, and I had no plausible excuse. When I was younger, I had faith, a flickering thing that came on in times of great need. When my bell buzzed at 10:45, I was ready by the door in boots and gloves, a sweater and a coat. In the daylight, I saw the wrinkles around her eyes and the brown spots on her hands. She was grayer in the sun and gaunter. Her jeans could be a size smaller. The fabric sagged around her knees like loose skin. I'm so glad you're coming, she said. She walked like a runner, bouncing and trotting. Fog streamed from my mouth, and I grew warm under my layers. So how's the search going? Have you found anything new about your father? Not really, I said. I don't mean to make a secret of my discovery, but I am not yet ready to share, not even with this kind stranger. That's surprising. It's almost impossible to hide with the internet these days. Have you tried Facebook? Not yet, I say. You should. Even my mum's on it, and she's in her 70s. It was a stone church with stained glass windows and a tendered cemetery bereft of flowers. Inside was modern and warm. Padded chairs instead of the long, bony pews I remembered from childhood. The cross hanging behind the altar was made of light bulbs, art installation rather than sacred object. The flagstones were covered in rugs. Modern, I say. Yes, our vicar used to be an artist. Catherine knew a lot of people. This is my neighbor, Anna, she said, introducing me to each one. I was a prize, a possible new convert. Everyone was in jeans and trainers and hoodies, except a few elderly women holding fast in twin sets and pearls. I was surprised by their youth, their slim vigor. They hugged Catherine and smiled widely when they grasped my hand. The vicar was Black. Perhaps this was why Catherine had brought me. He was tall and spare and welcomed us in an accent that I could not place. All that was priestly was the white collar that glinted in the open V of his fleece. 2 boys and a girl got on stage, the girl with a guitar, the boys with their hands empty. They led us in song. The lyrics appeared on a screen, a few lines at a time, karaoke style. There was a man working the projector at the back, clicking to the next slide a second before we needed it. Jesus is alive, amen, Jesus is alive. Yesterday, today, forever, Jesus is alive. Around me, eyes began to close. An old lady, the most proper in the bunch, was the first to raise her hands. I thought she was signaling someone. Then slowly, it spread through the room. A man bent his torso until his torso lay parallel to the floor. A woman twirled once. Her skirts rose and settled. Catherine neither raised her hands nor danced. She was not the only one standing still, but I wondered if my presence was inhibiting. I closed my eyes too, but the music had taken them to a place I could not follow. I could sneer at it all, their suspension of rationality, their gullible thirst for the supernatural. But Catherine had been kind to me, and her kindness came from this place. There was a segment for prayer. They prayed for nations at war, for the Amazon rainforest, for children in the inner city, and then a tiny window to pray for ourselves. I too decided to suspend disbelief. Okay, I'll stop there. I'll stop there.
That was brilliant. Thank you. Really
You're
good.
welcome. Word exclusive. Okay, so now I'm going to talk more generally to you guys, sort of about my thoughts on such an organization as Sputnik, which I think is a great one, actually. So when Johnny invited me to speak at this event, I went to the Sputnik website and I also went to the blog. And there's a very funny, provocative blog sort of titled when good intentions make bad art, or something like that. And one of the things that was raised in the blog was the difference between sort of creating with purpose versus, creating with an agenda. And, I thought about it and I was like, well, is an agenda really such a bad thing in creative work? And so I Googled the definition of an agenda, and it says an underlying, often ideological plan or program. So an underlying, often ideological plan or program. And then I thought about some of the books that I have enjoyed reading. And then I thought, is the problem with creative work or with writing, like specifically, which is what I know, is the problem the agenda or is the problem bad writing? And then I thought, there's a lot of enjoyable art, a lot of enjoyable books with a very obvious agenda. So for example, Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials, that trilogy was written very specifically to counter sort of C.S. Lewis's sort of Christian Chronicles of Narnia. So like children's series for books, but with sort of an atheist ideology sort of behind them. And he's been very open about sort of the reason for his writing this. And I've read the first book in the trilogy, and I really enjoyed it. The story was compelling. And even though it was an agenda I did not agree with, I could sort of appreciate his storytelling, his character building, his world building, etc., etc. And then I also thought about Toni Morrison. So there's a very famous Toni Morrison quote. I'm sort of paraphrasing it, but she says, if there's a novel that hasn't been written yet, like if you see like a gap and there's a novel you think hasn't been written yet, then write it. And that was her agenda. And her very obvious agenda was centering the Black experience. And she did that as an editor. So when she was an editor, I think at Random House, she published Muhammad Ali's biography. She published Angela Davis's biography. She made sure she specifically went after sort of Black stories and publishing Black stories. And then when she became a writer as well, she also wrote work that centered the Black experiences. And I think from the 20th century. She's one of the greatest novelists, but she also very clearly had an agenda. And then, of course, like the biggest, looking to like the British canon, you see an agenda with a capital A, Charles Dickens, you know, and it's funny actually. So it's sort of to contemporary times, you know, sometimes people get really put off by his agenda, his so-called preachiness, and yet, you know, the prose still stands up, the storytelling still stands up, the characters still stand up, and so you will continue to have every Christmas, I don't know, some Dickens novel being adapted yet for the 22nd time, because, you know, the writing is compelling. So I thought, well, I don't necessarily think that the agenda is the problem. I think it's more the bad writing that's the problem. So I think the issue is when you think the loftiness of your agenda will cover bad writing. So if you think, well, you know, I've come to write books that, you know, glorify God, or however, whatever perspective you come from, you're still subject to the same rigor as an atheist or an agnostic or a Sikh or a Hindu writer. You're still going to have to focus on your sentences. You're still going to have to focus on your craft. You're still going to read wide. You're still going to have to read widely. You're still going to have to learn how to develop your characters. It's no good if a carpenter, you know, because sometimes with creatives, we can get very airy-fairy and very sort of lofty and very imprecise sometimes. It's no good saying, for a carpenter to say, I want to make chairs that glorify God. Okay, that's a very good and lofty aim. But can people sit in the chairs that you make? Can people sit down without falling off the chair? And so for myself personally, I don't write explicitly Christian books in the sense that not all my characters are Christians, etc., etc. But what I do try to do in my work, and that's why I chose this extract to read to you guys, is because I always try to make sure that somewhere in the story, somebody bumps against faith in the world I create, because it's a world that I know, and it's a world that I know well, that I can describe, you know. And also, I always try to make sure that there is a sympathetic Christian character in all my work. So that's one of my quote unquote agendas. So it's so funny, when I gave Sankofa to my sister to read, my sister Dinachi, she read it and she was really, really worried. Because once she came across the Christian character, she was like, no, she's going to do something, like she's going to hit somebody over the head with a Bible, because that's what we're used to seeing. So all through the novel, she was waiting, you know, she was waiting for this character to do something weird or do something random. But it's like, no, actually, there are loads of normal, nice, perfectly nice to hang out and chat with Christians, but in popular imagination, on TV, in books, etc., but always a bit weird. And on one sense, okay, everybody's a bit weird, but like we're not especially weird because we're Christians. We're just sort of like the normal human weird. So that's one thing I always try to do. And yeah, put a sympathetic Christian character. So I had that in The Spider King's Daughter. Had that a little bit in Welcome to Lagos, so to sort of explore sort of faith ideas, and I also have it in Sankofa. And I sort of think of it as and actually, no, before I go to this point, and also the thing with sort of writing Christian themes and why you really do have to sharpen your craft. I'm sure you're all very lofty people, so you may not have heard of something called the Bad Sex Award, but it's an award every year given to the worst, given to like the worst sex scene in literature, and it usually goes to literary fiction writers because apparently we're the worst culprits. But the problem, or let me not say the problem, one of the challenges of writing about faith is that it's something that has been written about so often that it's difficult to escape from the cliches. It's difficult to escape from the lazy writing or the lazy words. And so that's why it's sort of the same thing with writing about sex, you know, like people have done it so often that it's so easy to sort of slide into that cliche. So to be original in this realm, you're going to need sort of a little bit more thinking about it. And I think that's what we often push against when we see work that quote unquote has this obvious Christian agenda. I think often what we're reacting against is not the fact that the main character is a Christian. It's just the fact that sometimes writing is not often very good, leaning on cliches. You sort of read to the end and say, well, okay, because you wanted me to say, praise God at the end of this book, a lot of plot things have been tied together and this doesn't really make sense and that doesn't really make sense. But okay, at the end, praise God, to God be the glory. And I think of it a little bit as, so this is the next point I wanted to make, as a Trojan horse. This is how I think of my writing. So yeah, I'm sure most of us know the story of, but I'll tell it again because, you know, I don't know where everybody's from. The Trojan horse, Battle of Troy, I think it's like the Greeks versus the Trojans, and they're fighting it for years. It's in something called the Iliad. I haven't read it. They made a movie of it actually with Brad Pitt. You may have also seen the movie, which may be as good as the Iliad. I don't know because I haven't read the Iliad. But anyways, I can see people shaking their heads. Anyways, so the Trojans the Greeks keep trying to win the Trojans and they're fighting for years and they can't do it. And so they decide to trick the Trojans. So they make this really nice wooden horse and then it's hollow inside and like some of the Greek army hides in the Trojan horse. And so the Trojans think, yay, we've won the war, the Greeks have gone, because then they sail off in their boats. And then they bring the horse into the city and then the Greeks break out of the horse when everybody's celebrating and a little bit drunk, and then they kill everybody and they win the war. We're not trying to kill people, but let's throw away that part of the metaphor. Let's focus on the horse. Now, I think almost everybody has an agenda. Almost every creative has an agenda in the sense that whatever ideological position you're writing from will just naturally seep into the worlds you create, or naturally seep into the work you create. And so, you know, there's some writers that, you know, when you hear them talk, you can tell that this is somebody with a very cynical worldview. They don't believe that people can never have any good intentions behind what they do. You know, the world, that feeling, you know, sort of the feeling that you get on like sort of like your emotional palette, whether it's a feeling of hope or whether it's a feeling of dejection, etc., all this is tied to whatever the person who's creating the work, it's tied to their ideological positions. And it naturally sort of seeps into the world that they create. And I sort of see that ideological position as what's inside the Trojan horse. And so everybody makes sort of this creative work. And what you notice first is the outside of the work. And then when you interact with it, the ideology is sort of inside this horse. And I suppose for me, that's what's inside my own sort of Trojan horse, my faith, things I want to explore, things I want to leave on people's emotional palette after they've read one of my books, things about hope, redemption, grace, creating a world where those ideas are possible, where those things are possible. And I guess the important question that I ask myself is, well, what's the quality of my horse? So is the outside of the horse appealing? Is it actually something that I've worked on my craft so that the Trojans will actually want to pull my horse into their city? And so they can actually engage with it? Or will you leave your Trojan horse and they're like, this horse is sort of pretty ugly actually, and it's pretty like, there's sorts of splinters on this wooden horse, and actually we don't want it in our city, so we're just going to burn it. And then they accidentally burn the Greeks inside. So yeah, that's another possible ending to the Iliad, Homer. There we go. So the last thing I'm going to leave you with is a scripture from Exodus 31. And it's about the building of the Ark of the Covenant and how the people who were chosen to build the Ark of the Covenant were selected. And the scripture, I'll read verses 1, I think, to 6. So then the Lord said to Moses, look, I have specifically chosen Bezalel, son of Uri, grandson of Hur, of the tribe of Judah. I have filled him with the Spirit of God, giving him great wisdom, ability, and expertise in all kinds of crafts. He is a master craftsman, expert in working with gold, silver, and bronze. He is skilled in engraving and mounting gemstones and in carving wood. He is a master at every craft. And I think, yeah, that's sort of what we're all called to in whatever sort of creative work, wherever we find ourselves really, to try and become masters of our craft. So, Bezalel had to learn how to work gold and gemstones, etc., etc. He couldn't say, well, I just sort of love God and I want to glorify God. Well, then the ark wouldn't have fit, and then all the jewels would have like fallen out, and like, I don't know, it would have been defective. There'd have had to be an ark part 2 after Bezalel was done. So yes, I think that's sort of the way I see it and how I integrate my faith into my writing. So yeah, I'm done. That's the end.
That is, as you said before about getting published, you think it's the end, but it's only the beginning.
Well, yes, yeah, well, there we go.
Absolutely brilliant. So much stuff there to bounce off. And so we've got about got the best part of half an hour to really grill Chibundu and squeeze her of her wisdom, which is good. I'd like to start by just talking about this horse. And you said about making the horse palatable so that people don't burn it, which I thought was a great image. What would be your kind of some of your bugbears then about bad writing? What kind of things do you see, whether it's Christian or not Christian writing, that you'd say, well, look, no, you need to get rid of these sort of things, or add in these sort of things? If you could pick, I don't know, picking a number from there, 3 things that you say, yeah, you need to sort your horse out in these ways, what would you say?
Well, so the first one is it like interesting? So generally stories sort of need to have conflict. And so there needs to be something at stake. And it's not just that I want to learn a lesson at the end. It's sort of like that interesting thing. So there's sort of the general story, but then there's also the language that the story is told in. And so sometimes, even though the concept of the story is appealing to me, sort of I can't get past the first maybe 5 pages. So like, for example, one is sort of like cliches. And again, always the word cliche has become a cliche because it's like, well, what do you mean? Well, it means sort of like when you're describing things in language that you've already heard before, and so your mind switches off because like it doesn't grab your attention. The language that the person is using just doesn't grab your attention because it's I've heard it before. And then also, what else would I say that I don't like in a book? I don't like an agenda to be too pointed. I said there's nothing wrong with agendas, but like sometimes I feel like it strangles the story, or it can strangle the story. So because you want everybody to live happily ever after at the end, then everything just sort of becomes all sort of neatly tied together. And then you sort of forget you're reading a story. So I think things that pull you out of the story, you forget you're reading a story and then you think, oh, the author has done X, Y, Z so that X, Y, Z can happen. So I think, yeah, those 3 things: a compelling story, language that is not cliched, and sort of a plot that feels organic. Yeah.
That's fascinating. I mean, we talked about this briefly on the phone. So just to say, great questions coming in. I'm getting mine in right at the beginning. You'll have yours in a moment, honest. We talked on the phone the other day a bit about, I'm a big fan of Flannery O'Connor, and I've been struck with her writing where she talks about starting with place, moving on to character, and plot comes last for her. Now, I'm not saying that you are in that exact mold, but what's really fascinating me about your writing is how Lagos isn't just the setting for your books. Lagos, particularly in Welcome to Lagos, is like the main character. I came away from that thinking, wow, I found out about this place. We said some of the things maybe you shouldn't do to make the horse look shoddy, but that is a real strength in your writing. How do you write place well? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I think place is in the details. So I remember, like, I didn't really used to write a lot of description of setting. And the first time my agent said, oh, we'd like to sort of get more of a feel of Lagos. It was when I was editing The Spider King's Daughter. And so I just inserted all these cliches, it's hot, it's so hot, the sweat runs down your face. No, it's so noisy, so you're sort of just borrowing language. You're not sort of noticing specific details. So for example, like in the church scene I just read, like some of the details that sort of made it, for me anyway, specific to what I remember sort of going to sort of fairly charismatic Anglican church, like the thing with the projector and like the words coming up like it's you're at a karaoke, or like the thing with with the cross, like the specific cross, not having a wooden cross, but having a slightly hip cross, sort of the standard wooden cross, is not quite 2020, so, or 2021. All these sort of details, finding the specific, like writing place is often about specificity. Yes, the specific details.
Now that's great, because it seems you can, you write as someone who knows the place, but also in that extract you just read, particularly, you write as someone who can step outside of a place, to be able to write into. I found that fascinating, that you notice things about church experience that I and surely many of us would have had. But you think to see it new, and so an onlooker who's never seen it, can see it. That's brilliant. Well, on to character then. We talked a bit about place. So I asked this question, it's an excellent question. Is there ever a push-pull between actions that are authentic to your character and your own personal beliefs?
That's a good question, actually. Yes, I mean, there definitely is, in the set, but part of it is, okay, so for example, a fairly straightforward example, I'm celibate, so, but not all my characters are Christian, so like, some of them don't have sex until marriage, as people do in the real world. I know, I saw somebody make a face, yeah, exactly. And so how graphic to make my sex scenes, for example, when I do include them, or when I do reference sort of sex, is something that sort of I think about sort of like how, and yet at the same time though, I think also generally sometimes we can just be quite prudish. There is a lot of sex in the Bible, like there's a lot. The Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood's very famous book, is based on Sarah and Abraham and Hagar, and that sort of menage a trois that was going on there, as instigated by his wife, found his mistress for him and then got angry and so on and so forth. And then you have like Judah and Tamar. There's a lot of sex in the Bible. So I think sometimes it may just be my prudish Pentecostal West African upbringing as opposed to anything else. But yeah, sometimes it is something that I do think about, how I write things that I don't personally engage with. And yeah, it's something that I think about, but I try not to make it, if it's organic or something my character would do, I try to include it, but not include it explicitly, sometimes because I actually just don't know how to include it specifically because I don't know much about it. But if I feel it's something they would do, I try to include it, but not make it explicit. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things, it was an excellent question, not one of mine either, so well done to ask that. One of the things I think that many Christian writers find difficult, and many Christian artists in any way, is to include anything in their work that detracts or could potentially put people off Christianity. And I found your characters, you include, like you said, you include a sympathetic Christian character, but at the same time, in your writing, it's clear you don't shy away from being honest about the state of some people who would call themselves Christians and don't act very Christian, or those who are Christians who make mistakes as well. is there ever a pull in that where does that come naturally to show the flaws of Christianity as well as its benefits, I suppose?
Yes, because that's actually how all of us experience Christianity or being Christians, if we're honest. Okay, so like I'll give an honest example. I haven't written up, and I do want to start writing more. I think I sort of have the tools now more to write about my experience as a Christian honestly, and so that I can write about sort of the transcendental experiences that I have with the church, but also the very annoying experiences that I have with the church, because we're human beings, and the church is made up of human beings, and so they collide. But sometimes and this is what I say, sometimes when your agenda seems to be strangling the writing, you only want to show the positives, and so that's just not very honest. So for example, every time I walk into one of sort of like the more sort of trendy, charismatic sort of churches, which I love going to, it's nice, they have great worship music, their pastors, etc. I always think, why is everybody in the worship team, why are they all young? And why are they all slim? And why are they all good looking? Like, it looks like a casting for like the Gap advert. But yes, I can also go into the church and then they start singing, I am chosen, I am free. And I'm like, yes, I'm chosen, I'm free. But these two things exist side by side. And so it's not honest to just show one and not show the other, because this is our experience as Christians. Or like, you get irritated. Like, sometimes, especially let's leave, the sort of more, maybe like the Anglican setting or the Anglican charismatic setting, or the more, I don't know how to more white, more Caucasian sort of settings. And then, for example, move to like the African Pentecostal settings, for example. Like sometimes, you'll be nodding along to the sermon, and like the pastor will say something about women's dressing, and you're like, what? Can you leave women's dressing alone? Like, you're like, stop the sermon, stop. I'm leaving, I'm picking up my bag and I'm walking out of this church. Mind your business. If my skirt is too short, look to the heavens, okay? Look to the heavens. But yes, that's our experience. But it doesn't mean that same pastor who annoys us, cannot sometimes have a profound word that they give to us, because that's the thing, sometimes. And again, we live in a world that sort of tries to polarize, everything is either this or that, it's either positive or negative. That's just not human beings. It's not.
Wait, we're just going to have to pause. I've got a sermon on Sunday. I've just got to edit quickly. I'll be back in a moment. Just checking. It's very good, Chibundu. I love it. I'm rattling through these questions. All of this stuff is gold. Really, really good. I hope the recording works this time. On to plot. Talk to me about place, character, plot. Do you have the plot mapped out before you start writing, or do you find the plot by writing? Another excellent question.
So I'm a bit of both, actually. I think I have the plot mapped out maybe for like 2 chapters ahead, but then as I keep moving forward, then I keep getting a little bit more and I'm getting a little bit more. So I don't generally know how a book is going to end when I start. So often I find endings quite difficult, and sometimes I just run into the ending, and it's sort of like, oh, I've ended. And then that doesn't really work. And then you send it to your editor and they're like, well, it literally just felt like the car was driving at 70 miles per hour and then it stopped. So then you sort of have to working a sort of decrescendo to try and bring it to a more natural stop. So yeah, I'm a bit of both, basically.
It's fine. It's really good. Well, let's get a bit technical. These are good. I'm just working out which order to do these in, really. Editing, how do you do your editing? I think, so let's just see the question and see if go from here. How much editing do you have to get clarity and polish in your writing? For you, would it be, I mean, I don't know how many edits, but like, what's your editing process like? And do you enjoy it? Do you enjoy editing, or is it a pain?
So there's editing that you do yourself, which is where you're sort of like testing your sentences against, it's sort of, I call it almost like an inner measuring device, where you're testing your sentences and saying sort of, how does this sound to me? Because you're always the first reader of your work. So there's that editing you do, which I'm always doing, which sometimes you almost want to do even after like you finish the book, and then you have to stop yourself, and then you're just like, whatever. This is, even if you want to edit it, you can't. It's gone to press, so it's time to get over it. But then there's the editing that you do where you send your book to someone else to read. And actually, one of the first things that I do before I even it gets to my editor at my publishing house or even my agent, I often send it to friends who are readers, or friends who I think there's something in the subject matter that they can particularly relate to. And just say, yeah, I would just like to know what you think. Because I think oftentimes we overlook the people who are around us because you feel like you want to get some sort of technical feedback. But the truth is, the people who are going to read your book, most of them are not editors at publishing houses. Most of them are not agents. They're just sort of normal people. So actually, they're the people whose feedback can be most valuable. Kind of like, yeah, it's a bit boring in that bit. They may not be able to like articulate more than that, but that's pretty helpful to know that, yeah, when she meets her husband or whatever, then I'm sort of bored. So yeah, do something about it.
Do you have specific friends who you go to every time, a small group, or do you use different friends for different books, and depending on, like you say, relatable circumstances?
So I mean, it depends. Like it's funny, I pray about it. So like with Sankofa is set in a country that is based on Ghana, but it's not Ghana. And so I knew that I needed a Ghanaian reader to read it, but it was like who? And I think it was the Holy Spirit. It just sort of came to mind. There was a Ghanaian woman who reviewed The Spider King's Daughter, and this was many years, by the time I was writing Sankofa, it was many years before. But I just remembered her, and it was like, yes, she would be perfect. And so yeah, I sent it to her, and she was perfect. So yeah, it's a mix.
Really good. This is absolutely brilliant, Chibundu. Thank you. I feel like I'm just machine gunning you questions, but I will. Onto your kind of process, I guess. What's a writing day look like for you? Like, and is it mornings? Is it evenings? Does it look the same every time, or does it differ depending on how you feel?
Well, I used to write just like at night. I used to be very precious. I'd be like, no, there's a special quality of silence that you get between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m. and it's like a graveyard and it's so peaceful. Yeah, but the problem with writing from midnight to like 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. is that, well, when you're awake, everybody's sleeping, and when you're sleeping, everybody's awake. And so why would you want to do that when like literally you don't have to? So I quickly unprecioused myself, and now I just I write in the daytime, like a 9-to-5 job, and then I come on Sputnik in the evening, of course. Yes.
Yeah, every day. That's how it is for me. Sputnik, if anything, we'll have you anytime, Chibundu. Excellent. So you treat it 9 to 5, so like with a lunch break in the middle? No.
I know that was a misleading statement. I mean, I said like I write sometime within those hours. You know, I think of myself, I write full time at the moment actually. And I started doing it just before the pandemic, which is good timing. So I'm well prepared for just staying at home and working from home. But like I write in spurts, and I've come to accept the way that I write. So before I used to want to be sort of more rigid and sort of formal about it, but that doesn't necessarily always work for me. I try to set myself a sort of rough target, maybe like a page and a half. But the truth is, what makes a book is consistency. It's not the length of time necessarily you do on each sitting. It's just making sure you do a sitting regularly. So for example, like even if you write 500 words a day, that would mean if you did that for 5 days, you'd be writing 2,500 words. In a month, you'd have 10,000 words. Yeah, in about a year, you could write a whole novel. But I think a lot of people, they put a lot of pressure, so they feel like I have to write this in 6 weeks or 3 weeks or etc. etc. And for me, that just doesn't work for me. I can't, you know. And I remember when the first lockdown came around, and people were like, oh, I'm going to spend it, writing a novel, and I'm going to have finished a novel by in the next 3 months. And I just thought, well, maybe you can. I don't know. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and so on. But I think it just puts a lot of unnecessary pressure. It's like in normal times when there was no pandemic, you didn't write a novel in 3 months. Is it now when the whole world is falling apart and people are catching COVID and dying? This is the time you want to say, I'm going to write a novel in 3 months. I'm going to write some of a novel in 3 months. I think is a goal that you can achieve with sort of very small incremental steps, and then you find out, oh, I got into the end just by doing it repeatedly over a long period of time. Yeah.
Really good. We've got a few kind of career sort of questions about publishing like that I was saving it, but I think this is going well. I feel there's chemistry here, so I feel like we're at a place where I can give this question. So someone's given a little pushback on your illustration and wonder what the question is, the Trojan horse is a symbol. The Trojan horse is obviously the analogy you used for the way that we can get our agendas into people's through our art. The Trojan horse is a symbol of deception. Isn't this an inappropriate metaphor for those of us who have a Christian agenda and want to tell stories of redemption and glory? What do you make of it?
Shots fired. I love it. I love a debate. Okay. So first of all, if a metaphor doesn't work for you, throw it away, put it in the bin. But what I would say to that rejoinder, and it's something I said to Johnny, one of the scriptures, one of the parables I love most is because I just find it so funny, is the parable of I think it's the dishonest servant. It's the one where, he's basically been moving a madness. He's been cheating his master. And so his master is coming home to sack him. And so he goes around to everybody who owes his master money and says, oh, how much you owe him 1,000? Okay, I'm going to write 200 on the sheet. Just give me 200. And he goes to all these different people. And basically he's like, well, even if my master fires me, that means that I'm going to have a lot of friends. So, I might lose my job with him, but somebody else is going to give me a job after this. And, Jesus says at the end of that parable, he says, the children of this world, they are wiser than you. And it always makes me think, again, there's that scripture that says, be as wise as serpents, but be as gentle as doves. And there's this film I watched about the slave trade, about the slave trade, about sort of the abolition and sort of William Wilberforce and sort of all the tactics they used, and how long they had to push sort of to get their sort of the laws through to abolish sort of the slave trade and buying and selling of slaves, etc. And one of the things they did was on the day they were going to vote, on the motion in the House of Parliament. I think they gave some free racing tickets to some of the MPs who they knew would be against this bill being passed. And so that's one of the ways that they got the required numbers to pass these bills through Parliament, because, well, they trick people. And again, for me, that's the whole thing of sort of wise as serpents and gentle as doves. And I guess what I'm saying is, don't be naive as you enter this sort of creative space. There are a lot of people that are either consciously or unconsciously working with agendas and are making things that look palatable on the outside, but then you engage with them. And for me, it's not an agenda for an agenda's sake. So I don't think of it as, it's not to prove myself right. It's not to win an argument. It's because there's a scripture that says creation is desperate for the manifestation of the sons and daughters of God. Creation is eagerly waiting. The hope I carry, the hope you carry, the joy that you carry, people need it. People need it in a world that is dark. People need things that when they finish reading them, when they finish engaging with them, they're going to think, oh, there's light in the world. Oh, there's goodness in the world. And so that, and I feel like sometimes a barrier to them ever getting to engage with the life that you carry is because, well, they're outside of the package, they just can't understand it. They just say this writing is bad. It doesn't matter if it comes from a good intention place, or it doesn't matter if the person, has all this great intention, but the film, the lighting is terrible, the camera work is bad, so they can't get to the message of hope that you want to deliver. But again, having said that, if the metaphor doesn't work for you, I will be the first person to buy you a bin on Amazon, post it to your house, put it in the bin, just throw it away, scrunch it up, throw it. I'm okay.
That is a great answer. I love it. This is really good. If we had longer, I'm sure we'd start getting some more fighting questions. I'm from Lagos. We love it, fight. Oh, we love it. We love it so much. I love it. And well, we've not got long. I'm really sorry to all those we won't be able to ask your questions. And thank you. The questions have been really, really perceptive today. But just career-wise, I guess we talked about. I mean, some of us in the audience would be just trying to get going on our writing. Some are sharpening a writing. But obviously, you said it's not the end; it's the beginning. But the idea of getting published and things like that. How did that work for you the first time around? Where did you send your the first draft of your novel? How did that work? Oh, so yes, go back to here again.
Okay, let me pull it up to the camera. The Writers and Artists Yearbook. Anyone who is serious about getting sort of published down the traditional route, I would really, 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 really recommend. Because before I got this book, I didn't realize how books got from people's laptops into shops like Waterstones or WSmith, etc., etc. So the first thing that happened is I got an agent, and my agent was listed in this book. I actually went through, gosh, I wish I could, like, literally it has a list of agents, the writers that they published, and that's what helped me to select my agent, because one of the writers that they published, one of the writers that they served as agents to was a writer that I admired. And so when I saw his name on their list, I thought, oh, right, this would be a good person to send to. And it sort of gives you sort of well-known facts within the industry, but not as well-known. So for example, an agent should never ask you for money to read your book. If they're asking you for money, they're probably not repeatable. So how an agent makes money is that 15% of everything, 10 to 15% of everything you earn, they take that cut from it, but they never ask for money up front. That's like, no. So I sent a blind submission to my agent, and actually I only sent to 3 agents, but you can send to as many agents as you want. What's useful is to always try and make your letter to them sort of like a little bit personal, so it looks as if, and I mean the book runs through how to approach agents. It looks like you've engaged with their work, not like it looks like you've chosen them. Everybody likes to feel chosen, not that you just send a blind email to 50 something agents. And I sent to 3 agents because I was 17 at the time. It's so silly. But then back then, you used to send physical copies, and like obviously, you post by the weight. And I just didn't have enough money for postage for more than 3. So I sent to 3. And then this one, the agent that's my agent at the moment, Judge Georgina Capel, go back to me, and then so on. And then so forth. That sort of journey continued. And then I got an editor through her. So how it works is that a lot of agents have contacts at publishing houses, and they build up relationships over time with specific editors. And so they can say, let's say you've published a book about cooking. They can say, okay, this editor at Serpent's Tail, we know they like this sort of stuff. This is the sort of stuff they would like. So then they built up these relationships over time. And sometimes what my agent did with me was to also edit the book before it went on submission. So getting it up to a level where sort of your publishers will want, because you sometimes only get one shot at these publishing houses, so you want to make it as good as possible. And so this is sort of all the things they do to earn their commission, as it were. And then after that, then I suppose the process is then more sort of in-house. Like the uncertainty disappears a little bit once you sign with a publishing house, because then you know when the book's going to come out, you get paid in advance, and then and then it's sort of other stuff. Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, thank you so much. There's one more question I've got to ask. We had lots of questions about writing, but I thought I'd put a slight curveball in at the end. It says, your hair and skin are looking great. What is your regimen? But just so you know, you're not meant to be asking questions to me, everybody, but I will put this to Chibundu anyway. So
yeah, Johnny, you can share your regimen as well. You can share your beard game. You know, it's on fleek. What's my regimen? So it's so funny actually, because thank you for the skin compliment, because I actually have been thinking of like going to see a dermatologist. I've actually not been happy with the quality of my lockdown skin. So yes, thank you. I feel really good. I use Body Shop sort of tea tree oil. I don't use enough sunscreen though. This is part of why I want to see a dermatologist, because my skin is prone to break out. So if anyone knows any good sunscreen for oily skin, please get in touch with Johnny, or put it in the comments. And for my hair, funny enough, actually, my sister has started going into this whole like natural hair thing. So I've just done a protein treatment, because of this lockdown. Obviously, this lockdown that is for our protection and all the other things one must say on a recorded event. Thank you, Boris Johnson. Because of this lockdown, I haven't been able to go to the salon since December. So I've had to like wash my hair and do my hair, which has actually been very annoying. But yeah, my sister told me about this protein treatment. So I just did a protein treatment on my hair. And I think it's working, obviously. Oh, I'm so happy about that. Yes, thank you guys.
Yeah, check the comments. People are agreeing that it's working. So, you see, we cover every area of life in Sputnik. This is working. Chibundu, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you. It is true, isn't it, that you are the youngest ever female writer to be on the books of Faber and Faber, isn't it?
Yes, I left Faber now, but yes, I was when I signed it then. When I signed it then.
Moved on from Faber and Faber. They were, we've all been there. It's such a pleasure and privilege, and your wisdom is. I'm going to be going over this stuff again and again, and I'm sure many of us will. We will hopefully have this the video up on our channel shortly. But can we give a massive round of applause and thanks to Chibundu? Wonderful. In fact, I'll do. I know what. Turn your mics on, and then we can hear. That would be great. Yay! Woo!
Woo! Thanks, guys.
Yay!
Oh, that was a good voice. That's really good. I'm just going to close out by just a couple of things about Sputnik. Some of you will know this stuff already because I can, although I'm flicking from one computer to the other, I can see you here. But this event's put on by Sputnik Faith and Art, and we're a network of artists of all disciplines who follow Jesus and make work for a universal audience. And I guess it's great to have Chibundu, a very similar mindset on things, wanting to make the horse look good, but also Jesus is in us, and we feel that's important. So how do we put those things together? We discuss that sort of stuff, and there's just a couple of things I wanted to bring to your attention. If you want to join the conversation with us, we've got a blog that we do stuff on. We put on events like this. You can follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook. What's the other one called? Twitter. Almost forgot that one. Sputnik Faith and Art. You'll get there basically. So that's there. One of the things that we do, though, one of the things we find really important is for Christian artists of any kind, connecting with other artists of faith, particularly in your discipline, although not completely. We found. I mean, I've personally found that really important, and others have too. And the way we are connecting artists together at the moment, which is working pretty well on the whole, is a social media platform that many of you will be familiar with called Slack. It's appeared. Here we go. Whoa. If you would like to join us, please just go to the link on the screen now. You don't have to do it now, but if the link is on the screen now, you see what I mean. And you can join our Slack community. We've got artists in different disciplines and different channels there. And the whole point is really for that to be a platform for real life connections, if you would like it, as well as a place to discuss, to talk about the different challenges, I guess, that face us as artists of faith. So please feel free to come. That's our website, but with a slash and a Slack after. It should be pretty straightforward. If you'd like to go on that, well, you'll be more than welcome. There'll be a short form, then watch your inbox. All of that stuff will be good. The only other thing to say as well is we want to support Christian artists by connecting the artists, but also we would like to fund artists as well. And we have just got our grant. We have a grant system, a patronage scheme is what we call it. We got that up and running over COVID. We rerouted all our funds to an emergency fund for artists, particularly those who are struggling over this time, as I know that many are. We are now bringing our patronage scheme back online, which is to grants from individual projects, whether they're self-initiated projects or community projects that artists are working on. This terms are now done. We've decided from the applications for this term, but come after Easter, we'll be looking at the next raft, and they could be smaller grants. We'd probably be thinking up to about £500 our normal grant, but there are potential for slightly larger ones as well to help get your projects over the line rather than pay the whole thing. That's where we are at the moment, but we'd love to hear from you, and whether you've been part of Sputnik for years or you're new to Sputnik, you never heard of us before, if you're a Christian and you're wanting to make art that engage with a universal audience, please get hold of us. We'd love to chat and help you in any way we can. I think that's basically all I had to say. So guys, thank you for coming. It's wonderful spending Monday evening with you. And Sarah, we could, I don't know if we should play them out with some music, or people probably just leave, but if everyone again could give a wave, if you're on the screen, we'll say goodbye. And Chibundu again, it's been an absolute pleasure. We'll give you a wave. See you later, everyone.